Headline was, who has the most to gain or lose legacy-wise in the big game? And they list 10 different people. I love Mike McDonald. You have to have a legacy before you can improve or deteriorate it. Like the guy's like 38 years old. He doesn't have a legacy yet. Now, you can change Mike McDonald's trajectory, but you're not changing his legacy. On this list, and really it's the only player on this list who you can change their legacy, and you know who it is. It's Sam Darnold. Because legacies, I mean, Sam's was already engraved in stone. They wrote it down with a Sharpie. Bust. He wins. And by the way, you can feel the tension last week in Seattle. You can feel his legacy. We judge Sam Darnold interceptions different than Drake May. If Drake May throws 2 picks, it's not a headline. If Sam Darnold throws 1 and they lose, that's the headline. Last week against the Rams, he was virtually perfect. In fact, people talked about Matt Stafford's game. Actually, Darnold was better because Stafford wasn't good on third down. And Stafford was watching Darnold. Darnold was unbelievable on third down, the key down. So in this Super Bowl, there is one player who can change his legacy. It will change the way he is introduced. In fact, I was reading stories this week, and there's literally something happening in football, and I believe sort of the jet fuel for it is Darnold, where people are now saying, we judge quarterbacks too early. We quit on quarterbacks too early. That's because of Sam Darnold. Nobody wrote that story a couple years ago because of Geno Smith in Seattle. That is a Sam Darnold story. There is no quarterback ever that's won a Super Bowl after being on 5 teams. He was a bust. It was engraved in stone. It was written in Sharpie. It's not a new chapter. It's a new book. But I will tell you this, that when I watch Darnold, and I don't think I'm unique or singular in this, when I watched him against the Rams, I watched him nervously. And I wondered, Sam doesn't play nervously, but I thought
This situation is fascinating for a multitude of reasons. I need to address this initial point, however, because Colin is the individual who famously asserts that you only have until Thanksgiving of your second season to prove yourself. For instance, in the initial weeks, actually before the season even properly commenced, he and John Middleneck were already declaring, I don't believe this partnership between Caleb Williams and, Ben Johnson is going to succeed. And now he's stating, we're evaluating quarterbacks too hastily. And I reacted, hold on a moment, just wait a second. Credit to him, though, he absolutely stood by and never abandoned Sam Darnold over the years. He provided me with the confidence to assert with conviction that I believed in Sam and in the Minnesota Vikings, and for that matter, the Seattle Seahawks. But once again, I've somewhat shared this perspective before, because it feels like we're revisiting many of the same topics. That's simply what occurs when you're discussing these two teams exclusively for a fortnight leading into the Super Bowl. I don't believe people will fundamentally alter their perception of Sam Darnold. I simply don't. I mean, individuals are already exhibiting reluctance right now. They're prepared to say, are we going to ignore that the Seahawks were already a competent team before Sam arrived? I observe those viewpoints constantly, and even if Sam performs exceptionally and secures a Super Bowl victory, if he doesn't replicate that feat, they'll simply remark, yeah, he had, one good season. They captured lightning in a bottle. That is how it will be perceived. That will be the narrative in all subsequent years where he doesn't win a Super Bowl, even if he performed phenomenally in that NFC Championship game and perhaps plays phenomenally in the Super Bowl. Unless he accomplishes it again, they'll just say, yeah, any quarterback can have a great run. And they'll reference what they do with figures like Eli Manning and Trent Dilfer and Jalen Hurts. They cling to that single achievement. I mean, Jalen Hurts has now performed at an elite level in 2 entirely separate Super Bowls with a somewhat altered roster, a different offensive line, a different center, a different head coach, a different coordinator, and yet people still respond, no. They concede, he played well. He actually performed well in his playoff game against the 49ers, but he didn't win. And they conclude, yep, see, it wasn't sufficient. He threw into double coverage or something. And it's like, sure, whatever you insist. He made numerous throws that were simply dropped. He was unequivocally not the issue in that contest by any measure. Certainly, there are individuals like Greg Jennings who defend him and so forth, but predominantly, people dismiss it. They note, well, he already secured a Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP. He's actually performed superbly in multiple Super Bowls, etc., etc. And yet, the response remains, nah. So, does it influence his legacy? Absolutely. It's substantial. It's significant. But I believe when we discuss how we assess quarterbacks, we have currently regressed into a particular mindset. I think this is what Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady have done to our collective evaluation. You're either the greatest of all time, or you are essentially insignificant. I genuinely believe that is what it has devolved into. I truly, sincerely do. I witness it with Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. I mean, the manner in which we discuss some of those quarterbacks, the way some individuals make such absurd proclamations, whether it's media personalities or commentators, it's simply irrational. I just encountered a clip today. Well, I didn't watch the clip. I saw the quotation on the thumbnail, and I thought, I'm not even going to click that. The sentiment was something like, I forget the specific individual, but it was a current NFL player, a Pro Bowler, a great athlete. And he said, Josh Allen proved to me what I always knew. He can't win the pivotal game. It was quite possibly the most foolish take I've ever encountered. Seriously, it's just inane. Even that take. And this is from someone who has supported Sam Darnold an extraordinary amount. A tremendous amount. The entire argument that Sam Darnold reached a Super Bowl and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson haven't. I consider that a senseless argument. It is. It's a senseless argument. It's a senseless argument. The Bills should examine that situation and observe what the Seahawks constructed. That is what I stated as soon as this all transpired. I said, look at the Seahawks. Yes, the Ravens and the Bills. They should examine this. This is what I expressed when the Eagles won the Super Bowl. I said, observe what they accomplished against the Chiefs. I did not say, look what Jalen accomplished. Jalen did it. Lamar, why can't you? I said, no, observe what the Eagles achieved. Jalen was a monumental part of that and deserves immense praise and credit. But the focus was, observe what the Eagles did. And that is the essence of this discussion regarding the Seahawks and Sam Darnold. However, I simply do not believe that, when circumstances become critical, it will substantially transform the narrative for Sam Darnold. Because, I don't know, you still must persuade people that Joe Burrow is exceptional, that Josh Allen is exceptional, that Lamar Jackson is exceptional. I mean, seriously, individuals blame Joe Burrow for why the Bengals failed to make the playoffs a couple of years ago. And it's like, Joe Burrow performed absolutely phenomenally. Yeah, but observe his performance against the Patriots in Week 2. And the response is, what? What are you discussing? This individual performed out of his mind and they didn't qualify for the playoffs. Like, what? It's somewhat insane to me. This is not to claim those quarterbacks have never failed their teams or have always been flawless, but it's just, And it's because Mahomes has won Super Bowls. He's the burgeoning GOAT. He's the standard. And obviously Tom Brady. But if someone like Eli Manning were playing presently, seriously, contemplate it. Depending on which segment of his career, they would say, he has no Super Bowls. Oh, he secured one Super Bowl? Dude, you were humiliated in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks. They would utilize it as evidence that you're actually not that proficient. Yeah, you accumulated some commendable regular season statistics, but blah, blah, blah. Aaron Rodgers only possesses one Super Bowl. He's never repeated it. You would think those quarterbacks are simply not that skilled, not that extraordinary. Merely observe how they are debated currently. We believe Sam Darnold's narrative will change? No. You lose a portion of that momentum behind the criticisms, the draft bust label, all that type of commentary, but it doesn't completely transform. It requires, I'll use Nick Wright as an illustration. It diminishes some of the additional automatic skepticism directed towards a figure like Nick Wright, and I'm merely employing him as a reference point. He will now be somewhat more compelled to offer commendation, to allocate credit, and to refrain from automatic doubt, and he cannot partake in any trolling behavior. He hasn't necessarily trolled Sam extensively with the pumpkin imagery and such. It reminded me of when they executed an entire magic trick segment. He literally brought in a magician or something. This was last year, I believe, concerning the Minnesota Vikings, one of those segments. I believe it involved Sam. Whatever it was, it at least involved someone like Sam or Jared Goff. And yeah, when you triumph and when you achieve this caliber of success, it detracts from that. Nick has consistently somewhat diminished Jalen Hurts, and then he was obligated to place Jalen on his Super Bowl performance ranking, and he positioned him instead of, say, Peyton Manning, because it was solely based on Super Bowl performances. So it subtracts somewhat from that. But I do not believe it now causes people to automatically conclude, well, the Seahawks are in contention next year. We know Sam will deliver. If Sam has a virtually identical season next year, the same quantity of turnovers, a handful of games where you react, oh yikes, not his finest performance, I suspect you will receive the identical critiques. And Colin stating he's observing nervously, I think you will perpetually sense that underlying, oh no, can Sam regress at any moment? Is that simply intrinsic to his identity? And again, irrespective, I suppose, unless he genuinely continues excelling year after year after year, wins the Super Bowl, and continues excelling, performs superbly in playoff games, even in a loss similar to how Matthew Stafford performed. I believe Stafford performed admirably against the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game, but they lost, and the consensus is, yeah, no, you performed exceptionally, and he lost, so no one truly scrutinizes him there. But that is what Sam would have to persistently execute, continuously. And I still believe the discourse would remain, I don't know, Jackson Smith and Jigba. For whatever reason, people don't diminish Matthew Stafford due to Sean McVay, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and Devonta. They don't apply that to him. They still apply that to Sam Darnold. Even this year, even when he has silenced the doubters. Not to mention, can you envision if Jackson Smith and Jigba explodes for approximately 150 yards and 2 touchdowns and they win? They will still attribute it to Jackson Smith and Jigba, Rashad Shaheed, you know? And this perspective comes from someone who has been engaged in all these dialogues about Sam, observing the prevailing public sentiment and all that. Therefore, I believe it's a challenging predicament. You are either the GOAT or it's simply, nah. I mean, even if Josh Allen wins a Super Bowl, they will remark, yeah, one Super Bowl, congratulations, it was due to your defense. Or, wow, you accomplished it once. Mahomes has done it 3 times. You know, and it's like, okay, that is the NFL quarterback paradigm we currently inhabit. And I'm sorry, but Sam Darnold is not going to revolutionize that. He simply is not. But those are merely my reflections. I would be delighted to hear yours. What are your thoughts regarding Sam Darnold? How would a victory impact his legacy? Inform me of your perspectives. Are you inscribing it in Sharpie, or is it engraved in concrete? Because if it's engraved in concrete, you don't require Sharpie. But let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment. Whether you concur with me or dissent, either way, let's engage in some discussions. Let's engage in some debates. But ultimately, let's simply derive some enjoyment. Please consider subscribing. We are constructing a phenomenal community here, and I would absolutely cherish your participation. I aspire to build something we all genuinely feel connected to, something we are authentically enthusiastic to be part of. I believe we are substantially progressing toward that objective. Please do not forget to endorse this video with a like. It genuinely assists with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you immensely. I will see you next time.